Thank you for choosing Tox News, your only source into earning a higher education, going on a conquest through the social mobility ladder, and finding the American dream. I am your host, the American Wacko Weirdo Rebel Scum Jedi Hero, depending on which side you sit upon. Today's date is June 14th, 2021, and we begin, as usual, with the Pledge of Allegiance. For I pledge allegiance to liberty and justice for all. Now, if you can hear it, I am a bit under the weather. Still on the recovery end. That's why there wasn't as many episodes last week. And then due to working scheduling for next week, I will be taking a hiatus. Hopefully also too kind of recalibrating this whole pod here. Alright, so last week I did not do a Militia Watch update. So this week I'm going to do last week's today, and then I think I'm going to do this week's tomorrow. So maybe slightly old, and then for those who don't follow Militia Watch, or who do follow Militia Watch update on your own, this may be old to you, but we continue nonetheless. This is the unofficial Militia Watch update coming from militia.watch. You can follow them on Twitter at Militia Watch. I do not get requested or paid to do these updates. I just like to. So, we have a second person pleading guilty to J6 charges, and the feds seek more. We have some J6 attendees blaming QAnon for their actions, and then we have a Texas Boogaloo adherent pleading guilty as well. So, we have the never-ending J6 updates, and it begins with a Florida man, Paul Allard Hodgkins, has pleaded guilty to charges against him related to J6. He notably was carrying a Trump flag and wearing a Trump t-shirt while wandering the U.S. Capitol building during the storming. He was photographed carrying the flag while standing on the Senate floor, the QAnon shaman standing at the desk behind him. Hodgkins is the second to plead guilty in J6 crimes, and his charge, obstruction of an official proceeding, is a felony that could net him up to 20 years and a $250,000 fine. I'm all for accountability. Especially for those who may or may not have attempted insurrection on our Capitol. But Donald Trump has faced zero accountability for his actions involved in this. And so it's a shame that Hodgkins can face 20 years while Donald Trump can continue influencing the Republican Party. Moving on, Joseph Hackett, another Florida man, was charged for his involvement in preparation for the storming of the Capitol. According to federal prosecutors, Hackett coordinated planning and travel to D.C. He is accused of conspiracy, obstruction of an official proceeding, destruction of government property, and illegally entering a restricted building or grounds, plus aiding and abetting on several of the same charges. That's very funny that they have evidence of Joseph Hackett coordinating, planning, and traveling to D.C., where even Charlie Kirk had paid for buses to send Trump supporters to the Capitol that day. So he could have, he at least coordinated some traveling for a lot of people who are now facing charges, while Charlie Kirk faces no accountability whatsoever as well. The update continues. The man who hit cops before shouting, quote, "There is a Second Amendment behind us," unquote, as a taunt, was just arrested this past week. Sean Michael McHugh now faces 8 charges related to his actions in D.C. on January 6th. McHugh also allegedly shouted to police officers questions about them defending pedophiles and communists, and used a megaphone to encourage the crowd of hyped conservatives outside the Capitol. Informal plea negotiations have also begun with Oath Keepers charged in the attack. Federal prosecutors say these discussions remain preliminary, but that they hope to fashion plea deals over the next month or two, allowing indictees to potentially turn over evidence or evidence for other cases in exchange for lessened punishments. Some of those charged in J6 are blaming their actions on the misinformation around the 2020 election. Others are pointing to the far-right conspiracy theory QAnon, a set of strange theories merging anti-Semitic tropes, pseudoscience, numerology, and other general conspiracy notions about the world's elite. Notably, QAnon is a theory now believed by 14% of U.S. residents in a new poll, a number that expands to 25% of Republicans. That should be a concern to those of you who try to act in good faith in your civil discourse or your engagement with Republicans or the Republican Party, which is also very fascinating to me because Joe Biden made it a very large platform that he would work with Republicans in, the government, whether it's the House, Senate, and, around the country. And we're just ignoring that 25% of their base right now are steeped in a conspiracy theory that believes our elites are hosting a pedophilic ring, and we are waiting for our Messiah to do something about it. It's just not a healthy conspiracy theory, especially since at times it does have its anti-Semitic tropes kind of merge in there with George Soros being the puppet master. So, yeah, cool information. Moving on, following J6, some experts are saying that many groups, including the Proud Boys, are struggling to find their footing due to fallout. This is something that Militia Watch has also generally noticed among many groups we have historically tracked. So they have some other miscellaneous updates here. Solano County Sheriff Tom Ferreira announced he was running for re-election in 2022. Many members of Ferreira's department were revealed to be either members or sympathizers to the Three Percenters movement, per an open Vallejo investigation in February. Ferreira and some other representatives from the department ran a seemingly really light investigation before claiming they couldn't find any officers who were members of these groups. One of those found to be creating far-right crafts was none other than Chris Pratt's brother, a member of Ferreira's force. And we've talked about it a few times. I don't know Chris Pratt's relationship with his brother, but his brother makes word workings of Three Percenters iconography and symbolism. So that's interesting. And he's also a police officer. Who, moonlights as a right-wing militia woodscraftman. So that's a thing. A Michigan judge is weighing a BuzzFeed request for evidence regarding the Michigan Wolverine Watchman leader Barry Croft. Time will tell if the ask, which other news organizations have now joined, will be successful. I would hope that the Michigan judge would release that information, or at least evidence, so that the public can be more aware of these actors in their states and also around the country, because the Wolverine Watchmen are not alone. And Bring the War Home by Catherine Blue is a great read on the evolution of the alt-right, at least since the Vietnam War, with the resurgence of the KKK just that recently in the 1970s. So I highly recommend that book, and it's very important that we really keep track of militias, because the veil of anonymity, or at least allowing them to work covertly, is a very dangerous operation, especially too since they found solace and great leadership from Donald Trump. They always talk about how Donald Trump represents the Republicans, and it doesn't really necessarily speak to all of the Republicans that he speaks to, mainly because by highlighting that he's there for the moderate Republicans, or just the day-to-day average Joe Republican supporter, is what really hides and coverts the more far right-wing organizations that threw their support under Donald Trump. So continuing on, Tyler Light, a Texas-based Boogaloo adherent, pled guilty to illegal possession of a gun after he was arrested for domestic violence. He's at least the second Boogaloo-affiliated person to have pleaded guilty in the last month, likely opening up the doors to a number of new charges against those that these indictees have associated with previously. And then they have further readings here, a review of those behind mymilitia.com coming from MBEZ, mymilitia.com being kind of I guess like a center to the web of connecting people to militia groups. We have from Mother Jones on potentially how we got to J6, and then from Mercury News we have Carrillo's Grizzly Scouts Boogaloo Cell. So there's further readings, and the link to this update will be found in the description. So if you want to check those out, go to the description, go to militia.watch, and check it out. So as for the content and the segments that we're going through, there's two videos. One of them I'm just going to have to kind of like break down into a 20-minute timer, like on my end. I'll time the video as if it's 20 minutes, react to it in that way, because it's an hour-long podcast from Dan Crenshaw's podcast, and I'm not going to do the entire thing. But I did find interesting points in there. I just think setting a timer for 20 minutes will be a healthy, medium. So, but first we're going to begin with this PragerU video, which starts with a clip from Bill Maher's show. Not a big fan of Bill Maher.
The answer.
I think he's an elitist. He's a liberal. So he finds himself on the right side in certain areas of identity politics. But for the most part, his elitism and his Islamophobia are real big turnoffs for me. So I'm not a huge fan of Bill Maher. Much rather watch John Oliver if I was going to pick a late night comedian who talks about politics. But that's just me. If you've got different feels about Bill Maher, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, just let it be known, not a big fan.
Isn't to make college free. The answer.
Oh, hey.
They don't have your coffee.
Huh?
They don't have your coffee, and I was gonna let you choose, but I don't feel like you are free.
I feel like anything that's medium roast will be okay.
Okay. Got a price range?
Like around $10.
For medium?
Yeah. Just don't get anything you wouldn't get. All right, Bill. Sorry about that. Just ordering some coffee with the roomie. Let's start this again. This video too is called Bill Maher : college has become an outright scam. Not semicolon, but a colon. I'm sorry. Me being a little bit sick isn't putting me on my best foot forward, but we'll do with what we got. You feel me? We got it. The show goes on. The machine never sleeps. It never gets sick. Neither can I. All right.
The answer isn't to make college free. The answer is to make it more unnecessary, which it is for most jobs.
Which it is for most jobs. I would be very interested into seeing Bill Maher's opinion on which jobs those would be. I know we always make the case for Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, who dropped out of college because their immeasurable genius allowed them to create innovative technology and software for the internet age, as if that also doesn't sound very probabilistic in a lot of ways, as if the probability of you two being a Bill Gates or a Zuckerberg are incredibly low. And also, too, the fact that those companies, Microsoft and Facebook, tend to hire people with college degrees. The other thing that I find fascinating here, too, is that public schooling, or at least regular schooling these days, aren't necessarily preparing our children for the future labor force with the level of automation that we're going towards, and how mainly the biggest jobs growing are in the technological sector, and a lot of those are going to need college degrees, especially too if you're looking at computer science or computer engineering. Even with doing some IT, you have to do some kind of education course. I've seen IT classes that are 6 months long, and you're paying a private entity to get that education. But it's very interesting here. Although college might not be the predominant requirement for most jobs, as Bill Maher puts it, but a level of training and skills and education might be. So I don't like the blanket statement here of college unnecessary, education who needs, you know? Because also too, like it's really like an argument only for people who can't, consider college as a viable option, which is mainly like poor people who can't afford it without a scholarship. Rich people aren't going to take Bill Maher's words into consideration, especially too, since they'll have like the certain connections where they might even benefit from nepotism, where their parents can get them a decent job in the sector. It just really depends on the individual. I don't want to go to college for me personally, but I do think it should be much more available because higher education is pretty important to a society, I feel like, and having your people have the most access to education and even higher education just really benefits the the public. So I can't argue against the existence of college. What I do have a problem with is its structure, and then also on top of it, how much it costs for people to get higher education. Doesn't seem very fair. So I have problems with the education system. College, not just the word college, the idea of college, the institution of college, inherently, I don't have a problem with. So we're literally getting just Bill Maher's like 12 seconds of college is dumb, and then Prager comes in after this. And we have a quote here. It says, "You can't deny that Bill Maher has been speaking some sense lately. He's right on about the scam of college and why free college is a terrible idea." I'm going to tell you right now, if you hear an argument for 12 seconds and you immediately agree with it, then you probably didn't even like listen to the argument or need a full rationalized reasoned argument. You just wanted to hear something that you agree with. And that's not something that PragerU should just openly admit. Like, we agree with him wholeheartedly. Those 12 seconds were the most truth that I have heard in my entire life. It's just not a great way to use your brain.
I know free college is a left-wing thing, but is it really liberal for someone who doesn't go to college and makes less money to pay for people who do go and make more? I'm asking.
Yeah, the excuse of the wealth distribution in this country isn't a great argument against making college free, because if we make that argument, then we're also arguing that the poor neighborhood shouldn't be paying taxes, because those taxes also too go into the rich public schools, I guess. But again, that's like another redistribution argument. Like, why are those schools so much more heavily funded than the other schools? And yeah, it just doesn't make sense to be like, why should we allow free college through our taxes if rich people are going to benefit from it too? It's just not a good reason. Like, so what? Like, if a rich person can go to college on the same level as a poor person? Like, that honestly, who cares? I like, are we just supposed to hate rich people so much that I'm like immediately supposed to be like, you're right, I should continue paying for college because then rich people would be able to go for free? That's not honestly, that helps like nobody on both sides of this, and it still allows the argument of poor people not being able to go to college to keep going. It's not a solution. So it's a bad argument.
A third of students now spend less than 5 hours a week studying, and when they do, it's for their onerous magnum cum bullshit course load of sports marketing, history through Twitter, advanced racist spotting, intro to microaggressions, and
so I feel like sports marketing was the only real degree here. And furthering your argument by saying that people going to college right now are getting useless degrees, and then following it up by making up those degrees, I get it. It's a comedy show. People got to laugh while they're there. But it just doesn't sell your point. Like, if people are going to college for whatever degree is offered to them, and that degree does lead into some form of a job in our current market system, like, then who cares? Like, we're raging against the individual freedom to take the courses that they see fit for their life, to effectively argue against people making that choice at all. So, like, again, we're like barely a minute into this, and Bill Maher doesn't form a coherent or even good argument as to why we shouldn't support free college. The unfortunate thing here is, though, is that he's a comedian, so I can't take his words all too seriously, but he's speaking to a bunch of liberals and giving them, like, talking points that aren't actually, like, good arguments to make for this. So, yeah, I'm giving this, right now, I'm looking at a C-. I would grade it lower, but I feel like since we're so early on, I don't want to give him an F immediately. I just think this is like poor framing and really lowbrow level of thinking. I'm so disappointed in Bill Maher every time I watch one of his videos.
And you owe me an apology 101. Why is China kicking our ass? Because in 2019, we issued more undergrad degrees in visual and performing arts than in computer and information science or math. The answer isn't...
Yeah, but that also has a lot to do with our culture, and our culture really, like, elevates people within, like, the entertainment sphere. There was a time in America where philosophers, poets, they might not consider poets to be very important. I do. I think poetry is incredibly important to a society. But, like, there were people who were known for what they did were on a different scale back then because of what our culture, you know, virtue signaled, what we saw fit as like the ideal Americans and the great Americans, the archetypal Americans. But nowadays with social media, the media, all of these are just mainly focused on a bunch of famous people who some don't even really do much in order to earn their fame and income. So I feel like beating college down because yet again people are choosing to go with more degrees that usually are in the realm of entertaining people and contributing to the culture further. That's because that's what the citizenry finds as important, it finds as engaging. So you can get mad about it if you really want to, but I think that's more of a cultural problem and not necessarily a free college problem. So we're missing, I feel like we're just not really having the discussion anymore because you don't like what Americans choose to, I guess, master in. So that's yet again another lame excuse.
To make college free. The answer is to make it more unnecessary, which it is for most jobs.
I mean, I'm just really curious now, and it's getting into a Prager use video, but I'm just curious. Percentage of American jobs that require college degrees. I'm just curious on this one out of my own pure curiosity. 35% of job openings will require at least a bachelor's degree. 30% of the job openings will require some college or an associate's degree. 36% of the job openings will not require education beyond high school. Dude, it's almost equivalent. You can't say most. Like, it's damn near equivalent. If it's 36% of the job openings that will not require education beyond high school, and it's 35% of job openings will require at least a bachelor's degree, you're not looking at most. Like, that's almost an equal level of the job market. And the thing is, though, is that the quality of the jobs based on of whether you achieve a higher education. Like, the quality of those jobs are also essential to this piece of argument. So yeah, you can get a job without a college degree, but is it a decent living? Is it dignified? Are you still kept at starvation wages? Do you have health care? Is there PTO included? Like, don't tell me that we're employing people and then completely remove the context of the quality of those jobs, because that's just as important as people being employed. All right, Bill. See, like, that's why I don't like Bill. He's literally just like the liberal Tucker Carlson who makes people laugh at times.
Maybe the dumbest thing you can do is go to the place that's supposed to make you smart. That would be college. Now, perhaps I'm biased. I don't have a college degree, although I employ a lot of people who do.
I don't have a college degree either, and I'm still here arguing on the opposite side of this.
And from some of the most prestigious universities in the country.
And it's also funny, too, that he said some of the people that I hire have college degrees. Like, that's like that weird capitalist flex. Like, I employ people who have degrees. Look how unnecessary it is. But I also have to wonder, did he require those people that he employed to have those degrees? Curious.
Country. I made a conscious choice. I had clear career ambitions, and I didn't see how a college degree was going to get me there. In retrospect, I'm confident I made the right decision. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of a company called The Daily Wire. We publish news and commentary from a conservative point of view. We have well over 100 employees and an audience which numbers in the millions every single day.
Yeah, if you don't know, Daily Wire is the platform that Ben Shapiro also co-founded. This is Jeremy something, his co-founder of Daily Wire, and Ben Shapiro went to college. So, I would actually really enjoy Shapiro to take this opportunity to explain why he wasted his time going to college so that he could open a business that did not require it whatsoever.
Now, I don't have a problem if you go to college. It's a free country. Do what you want.
Yep.
But the idea that somehow college is the great pathway to success and fulfillment, that I don't buy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on that same boat, but the thing is that education is incredibly important, and if you can have a higher educated populace, why the fuck not? So I don't really, like I said, I don't agree with the structure of college, and I don't agree with the level of gatekeeping that it has, that basically it's a pay-to-play system. But it does offer higher education beyond our public system that I can't deny isn't useful in the world that is greater than most of us. So I can't outright say that higher education, the idea of it and people having access to it, is inherently wrong, or I can't even think of an argument as to why it would be wrong other than the fact that it just straps an entire generation, the millennials, to so much student debt that they'll never get out of.
The left takes a different view. They are obsessed with higher education. To them, it's a human right, and they want it to be free, which just means
education is a human right. And so by saying something is higher education is like, that's just that level. It's almost like speaks to like the meritocracy in America, and it's just obsession of keeping things out of the access of poor people. Because really, like, if we just saw college as just education as in itself, in the same way as like the European countries do, that their colleges are also free. I think at least, most of their community colleges are free, so it's considered just to be education in itself. If we could just move those goalposts of the definition away from here's higher education and here's regular education, and just call it all education, because it's knowledge that people are gaining and learning so that they can apply those skills in other areas of their life or in the job sector, in their careers or whatever. I would be more interested in a society that only sees all education as higher education and offering it to its people, because the more educated your populace, the better off they will be. But unfortunately, I feel like the Conservative Party really feeds off of the uneducated base of the American, electorate. So they rail against higher education, and you'll even see intellectuals like Thomas Sowell tell you how you shouldn't listen to intellectuals that aren't Thomas Sowell because they're just indoctrinated by the higher educational system. They feed off of the ignorance of their base, and that's why we see these videos of fuck college kids and fuck college, and yeah.
Paid for by people like me, for anyone who's 18 and can breathe. That makes perfect sense from their point of view. One, the idea is a big winner among young people, a critical voting bloc. Who doesn't want something for nothing, especially something that costs more than a Ferrari? And two, colleges exist to do one thing: create conformity of thought. And since
yeah, and I mean, again, that would be a problem of the structuring of our colleges. As if public school doesn't have that problem. That's funny. I don't agree with it. I think for the most part too, a lot of people learn things in college that you don't learn in public school, and that's why you get so many Marxists coming out of college, is because they don't hear about Marxism until they go to college. I didn't hear about Marxism until, people kept using it as a buzzword to talk about their own political agendas. And my own curiosity led me into finding out more for myself. But school will teach you if you take an economics class, I'm sure Adam Smith and his polar opposite, Karl Marx, I'm sure they're taught, because they both had incredible thought-provoking, in-depth musings on the economic system of mercantile economics and capitalism. So I think it's very funny, because not everybody comes out thinking the same, especially too, like when you look at those who graduate with economics degrees, most of them come out agreeing with the capitalist economic system. You don't have as many economic graduates floating into Marxism. It's really not a thing. It's a smaller percentage of those who take economic courses coming out Marxist. It's actually a lot more rare. So I don't know what they're actually talking about. What are they conforming to,
college professors and administrators overwhelmingly lean left. It's a pretty good bet most of their students will as well. But I'm being unfair.
Yeah, but he's attributing that to like an indoctrination system, that like they're being brainwashed into leftism, not that they use their own brains and the education that they received then pushed them left. That's not a possibility. No, they're just getting brainwashed into it.
Fair, you say. After all, we live in a knowledge-based world, and America isn't making the grade. Don't you know we rank 13th in the world in reading, 18th in science literacy, and a pitiful 37th in math? To which I say, so what? It wasn't Singapore that split the atom, or Estonia that mapped the human genome. America is #1 in Nobel Prizes.
Yeah, but the thing is, some of that technology that he highlighted was also attributed to like foreign immigrants who came here and helped us figure that out, and then also a bit of like exchange of information across the globe. So it's like America didn't solve those problems by themselves. Globalization helped a lot. So that's funny.
Awarded. #1 in scientific citations issued. #1 in popular entertainment. And #1 in
#1 in popular entertainment. And then they bitch about all the people who are graduating with liberal arts degrees. That's so funny. That's hilarious to me that they will then take the credit of like, well, we're also the #1 in entertainment, but all of you who are graduating to contribute to that, I hate you for it. Like, what the fuck?
Technological advancement. In short, America creates almost everything. Even what other countries
Oh no. Oh man, American exceptionalism just highlighted there.
manufacture was probably invented by an American, which is why we're also the #1 economy in the world by far. And who
Is that true? I just want to see if there's like statistical data that says America is the #1 economy. #1 economy in the world. A lot of advertisements. All right, yeah. United States. United States, $25 trillion in 2024. Focus Economics panelists see the U.S. retaining its title as the world's largest economy with a forecast for nominal GDP of 25 trillion US dollars in 2024. This is a prediction. So I guess, yeah. So yeah, the United States is the richest country in the world, followed by China, and then Japan, and then Germany, and then India. So yeah, I mean, yeah. I just always want to look that up because I always think like American exceptionalism just like constantly says that we're the greatest all the time. So I want to see like other people at least confirm it.
Who made this possible? Well, here are the names of just a few of the individuals who pretty much invented the modern world. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Michael Dell, and Larry Ellison. None of them has a college degree. Many of the CEOs
But a lot of them did receive information, knowledge, or education that are on the level of what you would be taught in college. But we can't really highlight exceptional people, especially too if like they're like bona fide geniuses. It's not fair to compare every American to say, hey, you too can create a company from your garage. Like it's not always going to be the case, especially when you're dealing with the like limited amount of information that you have. Yes, somebody can use the internet to get the same education that colleges would offer, but you also have to have the same amount of time and effort to do so. People working 40-hour jobs or more may not be able to use YouTube College or YouTube University to achieve that just based on the amount of free time that they have. It's just not fair to compare individuals to Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Steve Jobs. That's honestly like getting every scientist and being like, why can't you make the same kind of discovery as Albert Einstein? You know, it's just not a fair level of comparison.
who run the companies they created do have college degrees.
Oh, isn't that interesting? The CEOs of the companies that they run do have college degrees. So yet we still are arguing that college degrees are effectively useless, although the people who work for these companies created by geniuses, they have college degrees. Isn't that weird?
But the founders do not. What they do have are things colleges can't teach you: curiosity, ambition, and a willingness to fail.
Yeah, but even if you have those things, if you have curiosity, ambition, and willingness to fail, you can still take that to college and gain gain more education, more knowledge, more information. You can still do all of that. The unfortunate thing here is, again, I disagree with the structure of it, putting it behind a paywall and making it effectively impossible for a lot of poor people to achieve that level. So it's not higher education's fault for existing. It's the access to it, which we keep behind a gate for a lot of rich people to benefit, while poor people only see it as some kind of lofty dream or something that pumps out a bunch of people who hate us. I like the framing of this is just like really upsetting, and it does nothing for the public good. It's just an arguing case of like, why should we make college free when we should just get rid of college? and then they don't really make the effective case of as to like why people would be getting college degrees and getting CEO level jobs at fucking Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. And while like the people who don't get college degrees are probably manufacturing the phones or working on doing the surveys for Facebook or answering the phone centers, like the calls at the phone centers. So it's just dumb. This is just dumb, and it's gatekeeping. It's elitist. I hate everything about this. It does nothing to solve the educational problems in the United States and only goes to bitch about how we just have education.
Those qualities almost guarantee success. A college diploma doesn't. Want to build an airplane? Engineers educated in aerodynamics are handy to have on your team. Want to invent the airplane? Well, you're better off finding a couple of restless bicycle repairmen. That's what the Wright brothers were.
Still, they had a lot more information than like a regular person would, and they had a lot of time and resources. There's so much context to how they could achieve that without a college degree that we're missing here. So I don't want to hear that two dudes who didn't go to college achieved flight. Like, there's so much more information that they had that they probably could have received from a college education that they received from something else. So I really don't want to hear that argument.
It's not that colleges aren't teaching. It's that too often they're teaching the wrong things, or they're teaching the right things the wrong way. Tech entrepreneur David Gelernter says, "The thing I don't look for in a developer is a degree in computer science." Quite a statement from a man who teaches computer science at Yale. Tech billionaire and
that almost seems contradictory. Like, he's teaching a class and then he proceeds to be like, but I wouldn't hire any of you based on you being here in this class. And it's fair, because there are people who, like I said, don't get the college degrees, do have this information, have the education, and can probably do the same amount of work as somebody who does have a college degree. But the college offers training to people who don't have those resources or education initially, or that information. But by keeping it behind a pay-to-play gatekeeping kind of structure, you're still effectively blocking a lot of other people who would need to get that access, to get that information. So I don't really like we're building a wall around education, allowing rich people to come in, and then arguing the case to poor people why they can go educate themselves and do it without college, while everyone else benefits from the education that comes from college. It's just not a healthy dichotomy here. Like, this isn't good. None of this argument benefits anybody.
Co-founder of PayPal, Peter Thiel, actually pays people not to go to college. Thiel and Gelernter understand that colleges are factories, and like all factories, they want to produce a consistent product. That means producing people who all think alike. But innovation and entrepreneurship require people who think differently. Innovators innovate. Colleges teach those innovations after the fact. If professors could have taught engineers how to build the airplane in 1903, professors would have built the airplane before 1903. They would have invented the...
It's very funny to me, because they do now teach kids in schools how to build fucking planes based off the knowledge of those dudes who figured it out earlier on, as if they still didn't learn anything themselves and had to spend immense amount of time trying to, like, trial and error of how the plane works. And like, there's just, oh god, this is so dumb. This is so dumb. College is not inherently the problem. The structure around it is.
Personal computer, Microsoft, and social media too. And it's not only big tech where this applies. 56% of all small business owners in the United States don't have a 4-year degree. That's right, the majority of small business owners, who employ more than half of American workers, either never went to or never finished college.
Because you don't need you don't need that much of an education to really understand what you're doing on that level. Like, you can achieve a lot small business wise with your street knowledge and experience. But there's still, like, you can't really. There is a level of college that offers a stepping stone to people to elevate themselves into higher education. So this argument is just, like, really piss poor, because it's arguing, like, telling people that you shouldn't seek knowledge. Like, you should just go out in the world and get the experience and just do you. Which, you can do that. I just think that, somebody teaching you, having mentors, and being offered information that you wouldn't be offered normally in a lot of circumstances is pretty beneficial, especially, too, if we don't keep it behind a paywall and allow access to it to a lot of people who are on varying levels of income.
What all of this says to me is that while college is useful for some people, it's by no means necessary for all. And it's hardly essential for economic success. Not for the individual.
Yeah, but making it free doesn't make it, necessary, but it does allow people who want to move upwards in the economic ladder and then also achieve, a piece of paper that allows them to apply to jobs that they wouldn't have been able to apply to before. Allowing that more access doesn't harm anybody.
and not for the nation. No one is being deprived of the opportunity to succeed simply because they can't afford a university's steep price tag.
They are, though, because I went through the numbers. Even though 35% of jobs don't require, or 36% don't require higher education beyond high school, 35% jobs do. And those jobs might offer better benefits than the 36% that don't. So, like, don't give me that shit. Like, being employed isn't as important as the quality of that employment. Do not give me that shit.
In fact, if you go to college, there's a good chance you'll be taught how not to succeed. If I were you, I'd think long and hard before paying for that. I'm Jeremy Boring for Prager University.
Like, he really just fed on, like, the conservatives' disdain for a lot of, like, liberals that come out of college. The whole, like, propaganda around critical race theory right now. The anti-intellectualism that authoritarians constantly thrive on. They're just feeding off of that and not really building a case on how getting a higher education can actually harm you, other than it creating a conformity of thought, even though they didn't give examples or explain that at all. They're just feeding off of you already thinking that to argue why you should remain where you're at and just create a business. Just go full entrepreneur, because you're more likely to succeed if you just entrepreneur shit rather than chasing knowledge and information. Like, come on. But I find it very interesting to juxtapose it to this video. All right, here. This comes from Dan Crenshaw's podcast. It's called Hold These Truths. I'm going to fast forward here a little bit to the introduction of his guest. And then I'm just going to get my timer here ready, because we're not doing this whole episode. I'm going to do 20 minutes of the video. So that means when I pause the video, I'm also going to pause the timer to make sure I get 20 minutes of content from the video. So that might mean that 20 minutes, we could be looking at the next like 40 minutes for this to dissect all the bullshit that they go through. But I do find it interesting in some of these points, and we'll get into that. But let's begin. Meow.
Privilege of having Richard A. Johnson with us. He's the director of Texas Public Policy Foundation's Booker T. Washington Initiative, which examines primarily the effects of public policy on African American communities. Richard, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for having me. I'm really delighted to be here and excited to talk about some of the things we're doing with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, along with the Booker T. Washington Initiative.
I love it. I love it. Let me tell people your history real quick, if you don't mind. It's a long and amazing resume, so it's going to take a little bit, but it's important that people know your credentials. So you were a chief of staff for a Houston City Council member. You've played significant roles in drafting policies related to public safety, public works, housing, community development. During the 85th and 86th Texas legislative sessions, you were chief of staff and senior policy analyst for a House member. You've worked on education, again, public safety, healthcare, workforce development.
So this is what I have to say about Richard A. Johnson here, is that he is an incredibly well-experienced, well-educated person in this sphere. So I'm not claiming that I know anything more than this man. I'm just trying to at least rebuttal what he says a bit, because it doesn't seem that Dan Crenshaw comes in with any critical thinking points here whatsoever. It's just both of them agreeing with each other for the most part, which isn't inherently wrong. But I think when we're at a time where we're at in this country, discourse between both sides who see two different solutions to the same problems, I think benefits a lot more than just agreeing outright with one side and what they're saying. All right, so please continue.
Legislation. You have a PhD in education. You've been an educator for more than 20 years, done teaching, done research at the University of Texas Mental Science Institute, studying the efficacy of counseling and pharmacological therapy on cocaine and heroin addicts. You've counseled adolescent males, Academy for Troubled Boys. You're a Texas native, grew up in Houston's 5th Ward, and you graduated from Wiley College, bachelor's in history and government, and you also in the Army. Was just asking about that before we started recording. You joined in '85. You were a sergeant. And following active duty, got a master's in clinical psychology and then a doctorate in education. And also president of Louisiana Prison Chapel Foundation, building more than 20 churches inside of prison walls. So just really, really appreciate you being with us and sharing with us your insights on these topics that are just front and center for Americans these days, which is race relations in America, police and community relations in America. And frankly, this entire discussion of where we're at as a country with respect to race. And it's a taboo topic generally, but I think it's becoming less so. I don't think we have a choice. I think we just have to talk about it and find the truth in there. And look, what it all comes down to fundamentally is there are communities, and it's usually and it's overwhelmingly communities of color that have just been left behind for some reason. Now, the left likes to blame that 100% on race and systemic racism. And my goal generally is to look past that a little bit and say, look, okay, that's fine, but we're ghost hunting if we're blaming systemic racism, because you can't wrap your hands around that. What you can do is talk about development, education, healthcare, business investment. These are things we can wrap our arms around, and it seems.
The thing I want to highlight here is that although those are the things that we have to wrap around ourselves on issues of today, those issues of today have still been issues of the past. So without acknowledging of what we've done in the past to alleviate these issues, or at least try to solve these problems, sometimes we have to analyze how we did it before so that we can better look ahead and do better actions. So without acknowledging the systemic racism and plague of white supremacy in a lot of policies throughout the history of America, it's not ideal to continue on without looking at those critically and making sure that we're avoiding the repeat of history. So I do agree that all of these issues are still issues of today, but by saying that we have to ignore what happened in the past around these same issues just actually isn't, I find it like counterproductive, regressive, and almost toxic, mainly because you're just ignoring the white supremacy problem that still persists because we haven't always dealt with it in the best possible means throughout history. So
seems to me that's some of the things you focus on. So maybe we could start there as far as your general philosophy on how we look to help these communities, because I think we all do. And what's the best way to do it, and what have we done wrong in the past, and how can we learn from that?
Yeah, I think the first step is to look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And if we look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you know, the idea of critical race theory was not a weapon or the sword of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, nor was it a sword of Dr. Martin Luther King or the SCLC or the NAACP or any groups fighting for equality. And it's because the critical race theory, the father of critical race theory is critical legal theory, and the grandfather of critical legal theory is Marxism. And so basically that has never been the aim of
I don't think I've ever heard that Marxism was a brainchild of critical legal theory. I am pretty sure that Marxism is an analysis of the capitalist economic system, in coming at that critically. So I'm not really sure. Maybe I'll Google it right now, but I don't think that's true. So I'll look it up real quick.
Of the civil rights movement in America. Our mantra was equal opportunity, not equity. Mm-hmm. Equal opportunity. And there's a difference. And so when we talk about critical race theory, we need to combat that with the one race theory of the civil rights movement. See, the civil rights movement believed in one race theory.
A truly colorblind society.
There's only one race on the planet. That's the human.
I mean, I would like to achieve the point where, human race is the only race, but, we're just not there yet because we haven't sufficiently dealt with the white supremacy that has ruled the country here, the United States, for hundreds of years. I mean, it's plagued the planet for a minute. So, but critical legal studies is a school of critical theory that first emerged as a movement in the United States during the 1970s, which is around the same time as critical race theory. So it's actually even harder for me to agree here because critical race theory started at the same time in the 1970s. So I don't think that these two, it gave birth to that. It seems that they're almost like twins. Critical legal studies adherents claim that laws are used to maintain the status quo of society's power structures, which is the same thing that critical race theory is attempting to do, is that it looks at the societal and policies, or the society and its policies, to whether or not it's used to maintain white supremacy. The definition continues. It is also held that the law is a codified form of society's biases against marginalized groups. So even this encompasses a bit of intersectionality, admitting here that a lot of our policies tend to move against marginalized groups. Despite wide variation in the opinions of critical legal scholars around the world, there is general consensus regarding the key goals of critical legal studies. 1. To demonstrate the ambiguity and possible preferential outcomes of supposedly impartial and rigid legal doctrines. 2. To publicize historical, social, economic, and psychological results of legal decisions. And 3. To demystify legal analysis and legal culture in order to impose transparency to legal processes so that they earn the general support of socially responsible citizens. I'm still not seeing the connection to Marxism. Okay, the British critical legal studies movement started roughly at a similar time as its American counterpart. However, it's centered around a number of conferences held annually, particularly the Critical Legal Conference and the National Critical Lawyers Group. There remain a number of fault lines in the community between theory and practice, between those who look to Marxism and those who worked on deconstruction, between those who look to explicitly political engagements and those who work in aesthetics and ethics. Yet, still not getting how Marxism gave birth to this. So, it's one of those right-wing talking points, too, that anything that came out of academia that critiques the United States, even slightly, it's probably Marxist and communist propaganda. So that's cool.
Human race. See, Martin Luther King said one cannot begin to live until he can rise above the narrow confinements of his own individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. Martin had left that space of race and using race to be a victim. See, Martin had gotten into the space of dealing with, the human race. And when you realize that there is only one race of people, then if you say, but in order to do that, my pastor, George Foreman, always likes to say, hey, man, you have to sit on the moon. You have to get up, 239,000 miles and then look down at the planet Earth and say, hey, are you concerned with this group, or are you concerned with the whole human race? And see, once we get into being concerned about the whole human race, this color stuff really doesn't work. And I often tell people, Congressman, that no horse wins a race looking back. When you see those horses line up to run a race, they have blinders on. They don't even want to look side to side. They want to look straight ahead. So we have grown. Of course, there are people who have not grown in America who still focus on race, but there are folks, America is not racist. Are there people in America who are so small and think so small that they're narrowed down?
I'm going to be honest right now. It's not a fair statement to say that America is racist, because there are characteristics within America that that it's not racist, especially when you look to the civil rights movement. You can't call that a racist movement because that movement was looking towards ending the discrimination against people based on race or even gender equality because of the women's suffrage. But the thing is that like you can't equally say that America isn't racist either, mainly because we've had a bunch of organizations and movements to keep marginalized people marginalized. So those statements, like America is both racist and not racist, because while we do have movements to counterbalance the racism, we still have the racism to counterbalance the anti-racism. So America is both things. Not acknowledging that is pretty lame brain, I would say. It's pretty obvious to see the United States and see that parts of it are anti-racist and looking towards social justice, while other parts of it are looking towards political incorrectness in order to balance out that power issue and hold on to white supremacy.
Into these little these little pinheads of the way they see the world, and the only way they see it is through race, then they buy into critical race theory.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's fundamentally what critical race theory is. I mean, to define it, it's all problems are viewed through the lens of race,
But then that would also be saying that critical legal theory is looking at all problems that are legal problems, and that's not true. They're looking specifically at laws to see if they are affecting people disproportionately, as the same way that critical race theory are looking at policies and social issues to see if they harm people racially. So it's not to look at everything through racism. Like, if I'm looking at this law, I have to look at it through the perspective of a black person and think about whether or not I should be mad. I have to look at it with my own lens, being a brown mutt in America, of whether or not I also can sense this law, not sense this law, or deduce whether or not this law or policy or social structure is disproportionately harming a certain group of America. It's not, oh, I have to be a certain race or I have to acknowledge it through my race. No, you can look at it and see whether or not it's affecting certain groups. That's the point of it. And it's very funny to me because every time right-wingers try to define critical race theory, they either do it wrong or they just can't do it at all. So, amazing.
Every outcome has a cause, and that cause is race. It seems to be no matter what. And there's simply no escaping from that. And it's looking at, we have a cause. Does the effect affect people racially? Does it affect people based on their gender? Does it affect people based on their ideology? Does it affect people based on their class? Does it affect people based on their religion? All of these things aren't a part of critical race theory itself, but are all a part of critical theory. So, like, when you take in intersectionality into it, you do look beyond critical race theory, but critical race theory still has its applications, mainly because throughout history, a lot of policies have been enacted based on white supremacy. So, we're just mischaracterizing here and furthering the argument, not even an argument, this discussion, because they agree with each other. And it also means you can never solve it. It's sort of a cop-out.
Yeah,
really.
My grandfather was a farmer in Louisiana, plus he fought in World War I. And my dad fought in the Korean War. And so my grandfather used to always say, son, you have to have more than one tool in your toolbox. Mm-hmm. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, if you only have a hammer in your toolbox, then the solution to every problem to you is a nail.
Yeah.
So and I tell my friends over NAACP about that all the time. I say, hey man, you guys only have one tool in your toolbox. That's racism. So
So here's the thing, is that critical race theory is only one form of critical theory. Critical legal studies, as he even acknowledged the existence of earlier, also too does exist. So like it's not one or the other. Like they're only applied when being used. So like don't come at me with this bullshit of it being one or the other, because also too like you're just effectively blaming everybody of reductionism, when of course in certain applications of certain policies and laws that's exactly what happened. The war on drugs reduced it down to focusing on black communities and anti-war sentiments. It was reduced to attacking certain groups, and you have to analyze exactly the outcome of that and how it affected those groups. And you use critical legal studies or critical race theory to do that. So don't give me this bullshit that it's only one or the other because you're framing the argument. Thank you.
Solution
Yikes.
is to fight it through the lens of race. But look, man, when I woke up this morning and I looked outside,
And like the worst part is that we're using the appeal to authority, a basic logic fallacy, by having Richard Johnson using his own experience to I guess certify and justify what Dan Crenshaw is saying and what a lot of conservatives are saying. He himself is a conservative as well. So they're both using their appeal of authority to basically get this across as if it is virtually true. And it's just not, because you have to use misframing in order to get to your finish line.
and I saw that it was doing a little raining out there. I didn't say, well, they probably figured out how to make it rain just on the African American community. This is racist.
Right. It's a belief that nobody else possibly confronts these issues, whatever that issue may be, which is fundamentally false. Now, again, but the counter argument would be the black community faces it at disproportionate levels, whether it's, okay, so I had a discussion recently with a friend, and we were talking about there's a higher either, I can't remember what it was, either infant mortality or a mother fatality rate post birth, and there's a higher rate in the third ward, and and I'm like, well, there's probably a lot of complicated reasons for that. Some of which might be behavioral prior to birth. Some of who knows. It's something that needs to be looked at for sure. But the answer was, well, it's clearly systemic racism. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And education. People don't, the argument was behavioral choices are 100% a caused by systemic racism. And this sort of blew my mind. I can't wrap my head around that, but that's the case being made, because the argument goes behavioral choices are a result of poor education, and poor education is a result of
the thing that you cannot ignore here is that personal choices are heavily affected by the environment around you. You cannot make your choices outside of your environment. So if you cannot acknowledge that the environment also too has an influence on somebody's personal choices, then you are not having a good faith discussion, and I must dismiss you immediately, because there's no point in talking to somebody who's that disingenuous. All right.
Of intergenerational poverty, which is a result of redlining and things like that. So how do you respond to it?
Yeah, I think they're overthinking.
You're from this area.
Yeah,
so
no. Let me tell you. Let me tell you really where I was born in 5th Ward, which is all black community, and I was born in an all black hospital, and I was born in the 60s. I was born in 1961.
You don't look that old.
And thank you, my friend. You're so kind.
Yeah.
But I was, and I lived in an all black community. And I attended all black schools, and I have 3 degrees from historically black colleges. And let me tell you, racism is not our number one problem in the black community. The public enemy number one is ignorance, education.
Boom. After we just went through a really long video arguing against people getting an education, this man admits right here that one of the biggest problems plaguing the black community is education. I love it.
See, that's public enemy number one. But it didn't just start now. I mean, if you look at the prophet Hosea, he said, my people perish for what? The lack of knowledge. And so what we have to do now is be open to education and appropriate education. Carter G. Woodson in 1935, in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, hey, we're being miseducated. Education is a problem in our community. In 1935. If you read his book today, it'll sound like Dr. Woodson is talking to you in this very moment.
Yeah.
we have to be educated.
And then, God forbid, if you use critical race theory to analyze why maybe the black community needed higher education or better education back in the 1930s. God forbid.
on the right things. The reason why I got a doctorate degree in education, because I saw that there was a correlation between a failing education system and a thriving criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And so, but that's not, the onus does not lie on race. Let me be very clear. It doesn't. There's white people are not making us not be educated.
But that's the argument, right? It's like
Yeah.
the system has created a situation where you can't get educated. You might want to, but you just can't. I mean, what do you say?
Yeah,
to that?
but that is not the truth. Because right now, if you look at HISD, the chairman of the school board is an African American female. Mm-hmm. If you look at the congressperson for that area, it's going to be an African American female. If you look at the county commissioner, it's African American male. If you look at the state
I wonder if they went to college.
reps, they're all African. If you look at the city council members, they're all African American. So
The mayor,
all of and the mayor. So if you have a whole city of leaders in every political subdivision that are African American, then why is appropriate education still a problem in the African American community?
And by the way, that's the same.
Because they're a smaller percentage of the of the entire population. Because if they were in the higher percentile of the population, you know, maybe let's be generous here, like 55%. If those people made up 55% of the black community, it wouldn't be so much as a problem. But they aren't. They're smaller than that. I mean, my guess would be is like 10% or less. So let's not, you know, let's honestly not. I guess I should get the numbers because I might be sounding a little bit racist here. In any of this is racist, honestly. Percentage of black Americans with college degrees. Ugh. More than 4.5 million African Americans now hold a 4-year college degree. That's not a percentage for me. So in 2008, 19.6% of all African Americans over the age of 25 held a college degree. The figure has increased significantly from 13.8% in 1996 and 11.3% in 1990. That's good. Overall, 32.6% of the non-Hispanic white population over the age of 25 holds a college degree. But then there's that. So although African Americans 19.6 are achieving, we're looking at 32.6 of non-Hispanic white people. There's a lot more like information gathering and research to develop the many socio-political issues as to why that is. But yep. So yeah, still more white kids going to college or graduating college than the black community. But of course, as the right wingers usually do, that's a problem of culture and not any systemic problem. So
Same case for a lot of major cities.
Sure.
A lot of
What
you just described.
But
Baltimore,
yeah,
Chicago.
But here's my big argument. This has been my big argument, and folks up in Austin will tell you this is my big argument. CRT has sucked all the air out of the room. How many people know what CTE is? We know
career and technical education.
That's right.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
But it's so important.
Career and technology education.
So important.
Right now, 95% of the students who participate.
yeah. There you go, my friend. Yes, sir. It's up to you. I don't really care. I was just looking this up real quick. The average tuition for CTE is about $4,000 per year, compared to $15,000 at private 2-year colleges. So, I mean, somebody who would pursue that would get like a little bit of debt, because I can't imagine a lot of people, like, you know, most percentage of America doesn't even have $400 in their savings account. So them spending $4,000 outright to get CTE training, I don't see that. So that's a little bit of debt. $15,000. That's not bad. It's not a bad amount of debt for some job training, but again, I have to question the quality of those jobs for me to agree. Thank you, sir. I don't know. You can do 13 or 14. Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're just getting some food. Anyways, I would say that, like, it's not a bad amount of debt, especially too, since a lot of those jobs can increase your level of income. It's just like it's still highlighting how education is a necessity. And imagine if, rather than having private college, putting a paywall of $15,000 for those people to achieve the goals that we are now setting in this podcast. If it was free and more accessible, how many more people would actually fucking do it?
As what we call concentrators, take 2 or more CTE courses, 95% of them graduate. And of that 95%, for those folks who think that they're just learning trades and not going to go to college, of that 95%, 70% go on and get a post-secondary education.
Wow.
I love it. I love that Richard Johnson here is talking about how great it is that they go to pursue a college education after that training. After just watching Bill Maher and Jeremy Boring from Daily Wire, 2 overly privileged white men arguing against the case for anybody going to college. That's awesome.
As a stackable on the certification that they receive. So when we have high dropout areas, what we call dropout factories, or that create the school to prison pipeline, why aren't we opening up the door and promoting and pushing career technology education? That has been my fight for 20 years.
We do a pretty decent job of that in Texas. It could certainly be improved. I mean, I fully agree. I mean, I encourage people all the time. You some a 4-year degree in liberal arts might work for you. Okay, it worked for me. Then again, I was also planning on going in the military. I was doing ROTC. So, but you need a skill, and you know what? Maybe don't pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for it or a lot of debt for 4 years. You can get that skill in 6 months and then make $75K welding pipes.
Let me tell you something. We do an excellent job in Texas. We do an abysmal job in Houston.
Okay. Tell me
and
about
in
that.
Dallas, and in Fort Worth, and in San Antonio.
So the major cities.
And in Austin. Urban centers.
Yeah,
we do
the suburban areas have really exceptional programs around Houston.
Exactly.
But so inner city doesn't.
But if you look
that.
over in Representative Allen's district, now she has a doctorate in education too, and she comes out of the education space. Mm-hmm. You know, she's very close with the teachers union, so that means they don't want very much change. But if you look at her district, less than 10% of the students in her district engage in CTE. 9%, one of the lowest in the state of Texas. But Sunnyside is also in her district, which has been named the 6th most dangerous neighborhood in America to live in, where the crime rates are high, dropout rates are high, student success is low. Why aren't we changing the mindset out there, saying, look, not every kid even wants to go to college?
Mm-hmm.
And
they're trying to survive in high school, let alone think about college.
Exactly. And so why not open up the trades and say, look, what we'll do is have paid internships and paid apprenticeships for those students who are excelling in the trades, and bring industry back in and connect it in those areas so that kids can graduate, and if they want to go right in the industry, go right in the industry. If they want to go to college and university, go there, but don't go to prison.
I want to ask you 2 questions, somewhat related but very different answers. So what causes, again, just going back to the source of a problem. You said, we haven't figured out how to get better development in these, or get better education, to change the culture of education in these communities. Why is that? Is it crime? Is it broken families? What is the source there? And then the second question is, what kind of legislation, policy changes will we need to get to what you're talking about, where kids are actually, it sounds like they have the option to do CTE, but they don't take it up. So how do we change that?
I'm gonna ask. The first answer is very short, and the first answer is leadership. That's the answer. And because I asked that same question when I was working on my doctorate degree with the former U.S. Secretary of Education, I did my internship under Dr. Rod Page. And I asked Dr. Page the same question you just asked me. And he looked at me and he said, leadership.
Okay.
He said,
so unpack that.
He said, number one, you have to change leadership. Or you have to change the mindset of leadership. Because if you have all of your leaders saying that you should prepare your kids to go and get a college degree, and a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degree, otherwise your education is a failure. So all of the policies that come out of our leadership on every political jurisdiction is telling the kids become college ready. Nothing is saying really nothing is saying become career ready.
Yeah.
You see, because what happens if I don't go to college? Which it has never been the case for education to send everybody to school and get a degree in liberal arts and sciences. The foundation of education is to do one thing and one thing only, is to prepare American students to provide a highly trained and highly skilled workforce for America, period.
Yeah.
And then that's the biggest bummer that I could honestly hear from this entire episode. I was silent until that point, and it's just the biggest bummer ever to hear that the only point to education is so that we have a strong workforce. It's just the model of production that capitalism demands is that everybody is constantly producing. I think it's very unfortunate because I think education should be something, a little bit wider than, just your job. I feel like the limited amount of time on this planet that we all have shouldn't be dedicated to so much production. Our level of production, I feel like, is insane and hysterical. So I think it's very unfortunate that we highlight here that the most important part of education is that we have a strong workforce and nothing more. It's very unfortunate, and it really even speaks to how much of our leaders really see a lot of the working class and the even supporting electoral base is just a bunch of productive robots, that we just need a bunch of people on the production lines, whether it's producing content on Facebook or making sure that the app works, or producing shoes, whatever it may be. We just need to have them all ready to work. That's it. That's the whole goal of education, and I think that's a very unfortunate outlook on what education should be. But that's kind of where we're at, because we're looking at a bunch of nations who are doing nothing but competing with each other for the global market system, and the rest of us are just forced to be pawns in their Game of Thrones. It's a shit reason to argue the case for education. I think it should be much more important to a human's self-actualization and their connection with the broader society, or even the broader existence of the rest of life. So this is an unfortunate framing and outlook on the world here coming from the right-wing conservative.
Field of human endeavor. That includes plumbing, that includes electrical engineering, that includes welding, construction, every field of human endeavor.
And all of those things are very important. Like, we need people that have those skills. But as we're looking into the technological advancements that we're coming into in the 21st century, and then ones that will evolve in the 22nd century, is that a lot of these jobs that he named will actually be automated. I shit you not. I know you're not expecting for people to have computers and robots to figure out your plumbing, but they are much more efficient and much more capable and reliable than human beings can be at this job. It may be necessary to have people to fix those robots, but even eventually too, we'll have robots to fix the robots who will have robots to fix the robots, because the level of automation that we will see in the future will achieve WALL-E levels That was an exaggerated child's movie, but at the same time too, we are looking at technology and AI being so advanced that we will have operating systems for a lot of menial jobs, and we will effectively make a lot of this CTE schooling effectively useless for large swaths of America. So we can argue that case and get a lot of people in those sectors now because we need them. They're necessary. That's the jobs that he's listing off are very much essential work. But again too, like having people to do those jobs also sucks because they get alienated from their work. They don't feel the purpose all of the time, and not having the means of production being within their grasp, that alienation only drives them further into the job just being a job, and the dissatisfaction building in somebody who's doing something that they're not necessarily passionate about. So
endeavor. But we decided to leave off that portion and elevate liberal arts and sciences.
Right.
And so what we end up having is a whole bunch of kids not dropping out of high school, not becoming college ready, and then the ones who get there still not college ready, so they drop out of college owing a big debt that they cannot pay.
Yeah, but Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college. Steve Jobs dropped out of college, though. So why don't they have the opportunity to succeed? Huh? Going off of that previous video that we just watched, like, why can't they succeed after dropping out of college? Why is that an issue for Richard Johnson here? Why would that be an issue for anybody? I just watched a video from PragerU telling me that's what I should be doing with my life, is I should drop out of college and start a business. It sounds like they're on the right path to success. This doesn't sound like a problem at all, Richard.
Yeah.
So that leadership is number one.
Cultural change.
Yes. Now, policy side, we have a bill right now, House Bill 1032, that will provide paid apprenticeships and paid internships for the students who are already taking CTE classes.
Oh, great.
Right?
I love that.
And so no additional money. Only thing it does is it allows the districts to use some of their CTE money to do paid apprenticeships and paid internships. That bill right now just received a date on the calendar last night. Well, you know what happens at the end of this week, really time is running out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a sign or die week, yeah.
Yeah, but I watched in the House, on the House floor debate, critical race theory, which HB 3979 is a great bill, which stops any of our teachers from teaching that one race is superior to another.
And then here they're then promoting educational banning. They're banning certain forms of education because it doesn't agree with their worldview. So it's very fascinating here that we've gone this long, and he's been arguing the case that people should get better education, but their better education should really only be about their success in their careers. If that education comes in any form of critiquing the systems of oppression that we have in this country, well, then all of that should be swept under the rug and banned. Do you see the issue here? Like, this would make Marx cringe. Like, Karl Marx would be cringing and ripping his beard out at all of this, at like arguing that the case for the working class to remain in its subjugation, while at the same time eliminating any tools that we would have of analyzing systems of oppression. Like, this is amazing. Honestly, wow. And that's my ultimate problem of conservatism, is that it just like keeps selling capitalism on people, no matter how much it doesn't work for millions of people. They just keep selling it to you. Capitalism will be fine if you just go to CTE school and you get your plumbing job, and then next thing you know, you're earning a decent enough living where you're getting paid more than a fast food attendant, and boom, you have a more dignified life. Capitalism solved. Amazing. Just amazing stuff here, guys.
That's a beautiful bill. They debated on the House floor 7 hours on the House floor, 7 hours on the Senate floor.
Wow.
Right.
But then I'm going to end the video here because this is an hour-long podcast. But I do want to highlight here how Richard Johnson just informed all of us how legislation is very important to getting a lot of access for careers and social and economic mobility for people. The conservatives are always saying how the private sector is much more capable at helping or managing the market forces. But when it comes to the job market force, we have to do some legislative changes and reforms in order to help people succeed. Richard Johnson just argued for that case by promoting that bill. And that's where I'm going to end Toxin News right now. Find me on Twitter at ToxinPod, TOXNPOD. The Militia Watch is in the description. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you don't. Rate, review, subscribe, hit the bell, and then follow your true passion, whether that requires school or not. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with everybody having access to free college, even community college, which is just the bare minimum. If you can't support people having free access to community college so that they can pursue jobs at a higher level than a cashier at McDonald's, then I don't know what to talk to you about. Thank you for joining me. Peace.
Mr. Madison, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but
You remain